and welcome to the Libertarian Perspective, a discussion of state, local, and national issues with a libertarian flair. My name is Doug Klippel. I'm the former two-time state chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida. Thank you very much for tuning into today's broadcast. With me, my normal partner in crime, co-host Phil Labe, the regional representative for this part of Florida for the Libertarian Party of Florida. Phil, thanks for coming out. Great to be here with you today.
Also candidate for Soil and Water.
Candidate for Soil and Water Board. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And, you know, speaking about candidates, Phil, we've talked about him for a long time. We've actually mentioned him several times on the show, and we've threatened the audience that we were going to have him on as a guest, and we actually are so pleased to welcome the Libertarian Party candidate for U.S. Senate here in Florida, Alex Snitker. Alex, welcome to the Libertarian Perspective.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here finally.
You, ridden hard, put away wet here. You've had a busy morning. You've come up from Tampa. You've got campaign activities that you're doing up here in Jacksonville, and then rocketing back down to Miami. This campaign has taken on a full-time air for you, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, no. I actually had resigned from my job in order to make sure I was doing this full time.
Now that's what we call dedication, and so we absolutely appreciate that. Well, we're going to spend a lot of time talking with you today, Alex, getting to know a little bit about you, a little bit about your background, where you stand on the issues, what's going on with your campaign, and why people should be casting their ballot for you when it comes time for them to make their choice for candidate for U.S. Senate. So we've got a lot of things to talk about today.
Great.
We've got an overhead that we're going to go ahead and put up that talks about our issues on today's broadcast, and as I just mentioned, we're going to spend most of the show actually talking about Alex. We're going to get a review of the Florida election landscape. Obviously, we've had a primary here in Florida since we were last on the air, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the issues and amendments that are coming up. Alex, certainly be interested in some of your take on what some of those amendments are in the referenda that are on the upcoming November ballot. How people get involved in the campaign. Not only, Alex, your campaign, but Phil, we're going to talk a little bit about yours. And then in our regularly occurring segment, what we entitle Government Abuse of the Month, unfortunately a category we're never at a shortage for material for, we are going to talk briefly about the Everbank Field, the new name for Jacksonville Municipal Stadium, and the simultaneous closing of libraries here in Duval County. So anyhow, a pretty full broadcast, a lot of different topics. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. Our next overhead talks about meeting Alex Snitker, which we've already done here a little bit, but in terms of meeting Alex, an 8-year Marine Corps veteran, as he mentioned, formerly a business sales representative. He's now resigned to donate his time full-time to the campaign. He's married with one son. He is, of course, the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate. We've got his website up there, which we're going to be repeating several times, snitker2010.com. Alex, what else do we need to know about you? And I guess maybe even most importantly, why a Libertarian? How did you find the Libertarian movement, and why did you decide to be a candidate for U.S. Senate as a Libertarian?
Well, the way that I have found the party, I mean, I've always known about the party, but I always would say I was so libertarian I didn't even join the Libertarian Party. I never belonged to either the Republican or the Democrat Party. For the most part, I'm not definitely wasn't a fan of either one of those parties, and have looked into the Libertarian Party before. When I first started running, I was running as MPA, but after actually going to some of the Libertarian functions and seeing what the message was, and also having people tell me that you needed to pick a side. A lot of people would come out and say to me, and it wasn't Libertarians that were saying this, was actually Republicans saying, well, you needed to pick a side. So I thought, well, you should go find the party that best represents what your values are, and the Libertarian Party was that party for me.
Yeah, fantastic. Phil, that's certainly similar to a lot of stories that we hear about when people are actually exposed to the Libertarian platform, they actually realize they are Libertarians.
Oh, yeah.
Funny how that happens. Yeah, I think you have kind of a similar story in your own right. Well, that's fantastic, Alex. And then why the decision to run for U.S. Senate? I mean, why did that become so important to you that you were willing to make such a personal sacrifice to do this?
Well, I realized at one point that politicians are no longer listening to the people. Not that they were really before, but I was calling on my congressmen and my senators about a specific issue, and I called 2 Democrats and a Republican, because those were my representatives at the time, the 2 senators and my congresswoman. I got the same letter back from all 3. Didn't answer any of my questions. It was a very form letter. And I started calling on them as well. And after calling on them, I realized at that point that they're not going to do the things that are necessary in this country. And a lot of those same kind of thoughts I'm sure that you've had or that other people have had have gone through your mind. I wish the candidates would just answer questions. We need regular citizens that are going to run. And then the other thought that I've had in some conversations with friends of mine that say, well, if you think you know so much, why don't you do it yourself? And at that point, I decided that I was going to run myself for office, and that's how I got into the race. And it's been a phenomenal experience. I mean, it really has. And it's also been a very eye-opening one. What I thought I knew in the beginning and what I know now is, a complete 180. And to be able to pull the curtain back, so to speak, and to actually see how this process works from the inside it's a very amazing and yet a little scary at the same time, with just to see what some of these other candidates are doing with with the public, and the reactions that the public has with some of these candidates and what they think and what reality is. Two completely different things.
Yeah, we were joking before the broadcast that you could write a book, probably a couple of books, I mean, in terms of just the things that you've learned so far, and of course future learnings to come as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, the next 50-something days are going to be probably the most heated days that we have in this campaign, which will be very nice, though.
Yeah. And Phil, from a party perspective, in terms of the Libertarian Party of Florida, it certainly was very exciting to have a candidate like Alex emerge and decide to want to take on the challenge of running for the U.S. Senate seat.
Not only is he our first statewide candidate, but I think he's one of the hardest working senator candidates we've ever seen in Florida of any party.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We're going to have to buy that man a tank of gas. He's been burning up the interstate out there. So keep away from the FHP. That's all I can say.
Oh, yeah. No. They only get me every once in a while now.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at our next overhead, Alex, which is going to talk about some of your platform issues. And I pretty much just borrowed these from your website, so people that do go to that website, the snicker2010.com, will see this as well. First of all, as you just mentioned, the system being broken in terms of the elected representatives not being responsive, sending you form letters when you made inquiries to them and things along those lines. You've come out on your website as being a strong proponent of the fair tax, term limits for both House and Senate, a balanced budget amendment, a non-interventionist foreign policy, which I find pretty interesting, given your military background. I'm going to chat about that with you in just a minute. Immigration reform, and then energy independence. Let's just to kind of start at the top there. We've already talked about the system is broken, but what about the fair tax? What about that appeals to you, Alex?
Well, I like the fact that it will be the beginning of fixing the federal government, not the end. I think it's going to create the environment for the free market to be able to bloom. Now, once again, as libertarians, we're definitely against taxation, and I agree with the fact that we need to not have taxes. Now, the fair tax, what it does is it combines Social Security and Medicare involved, and it makes it one consumption-based tax. And I believe that we'll be able to box the federal government in and be able to shrink them from there. Now, once again, the fair tax only deals with revenue. It does not deal with spending. So unless we elect representatives that are going to drastically reduce the amount of spending that the government does, the fair tax is only one part of the solution. The other part of the solution has to be that we go back to only constitutional spending. The other thing that this will allow for, though, is that the way that the revenue is sent to Washington, D.C., the states have a lot of authority there. So the states can do things to nullify federal law, and having that kind of control where they're a stage in the process for our money to actually get to the federal government. So this will assist the states to be able to stand up to the federal government as well.
Yeah, Phil and I have actually chatted a lot about the fair tax on previous broadcasts, and it is, obviously from a libertarian perspective, a little bit of the lesser of two evils, but I tend to be in favor of it because A, anything that we have has to be better than the current system that we have, and B, I do think that it will allow for people actually see more of how much all the free government stuff is actually costing them. I mean, if people actually get receipts that have a dollar amount listed there in terms of how much they're paying for things, perhaps it'll raise the awareness of just the overall level of spending and how much money is actually being taken from individuals on an annual basis in terms of taxes.
Yeah, it's definitely an education tool as well, and that's, make no mistake about that, it is definitely an education tool, and it does limit the amount of influence that the federal government has when it comes to controlling and manipulating the public.
Yeah.
Because they do a lot of that via the tax code now.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the major sources of gimmies if you go to Tallahassee or D.C. or anything. That's absolutely right. No doubt about that. Let's talk for a quick second about the term limits thing, because certainly this is an issue that does divide libertarians. There's some libertarians that actually would see something like a term limit as being an infringement on an individual's ability to run for office, their free will, if you will, in terms of doing that. You've come out in favor of it, and certainly there are certainly are libertarians that would also agree with your position on this. Why is that an important issue for you?
Well, I believe we need to get citizen legislators back in office. I also believe that the power that goes along in Washington, D.C. right now is something where we can't allow people to stay up there for that kind of time frame. I believe that anyone is corruptible. And that I think if the founders of this country came back and looked at this current situation, I think one of the first things that they would say is that put term limits on these people to be able to go up there.